Now, folks, I saw an Alec Gunther video. All right, based Alec Gunther. Everyone should follow him, subscribe to him on YouTube, etc. Fellow lefty. I saw he did a segment on someone named Reformed Zoomer, and I figured it might be fun for us to go through his video called "All Atheist Arguments Answered in 10 Minutes." So we're gonna take a look at some apologetics. Okay, let's take a look, folks.
Atheists have a lot of arguments, but they never really think of anything new that the church hasn't had answers to for the past 2,000 years. So let's answer them. Religion causes wars. Well, actually, only 7% of all human wars were caused by religion, and if you remove Islamic wars...
Citation needed. Do-do-do-do. Let's see. Let's see. So this appears to be from a book called Encyclopedia of Wars, which... I'm sorry, what? Okay, the Encyclopedia of Wars says there have only been 1,763 known and recorded historical conflicts. That can't possibly be true. That can't possibly be even remotely close to the number. Like, there are, like, over 100 wars currently happening right now. Yeah, like, wait a minute. Wikipedia itself records over 10,000 wars. That's just America's wars? Is it really? Wait. Oh, I have to look it up in a book. No, it's a joke. Damn it. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I buy this, given that I'm getting multiple and hugely disparate numbers for the number of wars. Um, number. Yeah, I mean, I feel like even with just the Roman Empire alone, you'd get to like over 1,000 easy. Nah, like I reject this complete lack of citation.
That number drops down to 3%. A lot of evil has been done in the name of religion. This is...
Wait, sorry.
Well, actually, only 7% of all human wars were caused by religion, and if you remove Islamic wars, that number drops down to 3%. Number drops down to 3.
Oh, yeah, okay. Dude literally just... Dude literally just looked at the same Wikipedia page we did. Oh God. Yep.
3%. A lot of evil has been done in the name of religion. This is true, but the most murderous people in human history have been atheists. This
I I love that, like, the example here is that, well, some of the most murderous people in history were atheists. But like, if you look at the people who fought for them, the people who fought for these murderous people were, in a lot of cases, very religious. For example, Hitler, an atheist. Germany was still Christian. Like they collaborated and built like an imperial cult around Adolf Hitler. They fostered religious belief in his ability. Like, or like if you look at Imperial Japan, they literally believed that the emperor was God. If you look at, like, I don't know, every kingdom in Europe throughout, like, most of the Middle Ages and onward used divine right of kings. Most Roman emperors had had cult worship of themselves even after they converted to Christianity. Which, by the way, we had a story about that actually. This one, nope. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. So basically, archaeologists found a letter from the Roman Empire Emperor Constantine, I believe. Am I correct on that one? Yeah, Emperor Constantine. Basically, in this letter, they talk about how the imperial cult of personality and imperial religious cult around emperors continued even after they converted to Christianity. So they're actually starting to uncover a temple referenced in this letter that was dedicated to the worship of Emperor Constantine. Like, this is very, very common for religious movements to be fostered by political leaders, regardless of their personal belief. Like, or even, you know, again, Caesar had a fucking cult, Augustus. Like, you can't really counter the first statement, people do evil in the name of a religion. It would be better if the Reformed Zoomer just accept that fact. Well, the thing is, right? The response to this is just that, yeah. What's interesting here is that instead of actually trying to counter the point, there's an invisible agreement here, right? People do evil in the name of religion, but the point that the Chad Wojak is trying to make is that he's conceding, yes, people do evil in the name of religion, but people do more evil in the name of, or at least the argument should be, people do more evil in the name of atheism, right? But what's interesting about this is that it's kind of a clumsy rejoinder, because most murderous people in history were non-religious, is just not addressing the point, right? Like, this is like trying to use serial killers exist, so checkmate atheists, like literally. Like, exceptions don't prove a rule, right? So, like, even if you found outliers like that, your argument would have to be that people do evil in the name of non-religion all the time, which, you know, again, is a harder argument to make, because people who do evil in the name of religion announce it, like, nonstop, you know? As opposed to, like, someone lacking religious belief doing something bad. Like, there are many, many factors that might fall into that. it's a hard point to counter, which is why there's an indirect response here.
This doesn't mean religion is true, it just means you can't use that as an argument against it. If you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be a Christian. Okay, and if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be an atheist. Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context.
This is funny to me, though, right? This is true.
Okay, and if you were born somewhere
Like, this is true, right? If you were, you to some extent are at the whims of the circumstances of your birth, right? Depending on where you live, your set of beliefs might be very, very different. But then that kind of gets into the question of God as an omniscient being, like creating you and then punishing you for not believing when, like, that's not necessarily your fault. And it's interesting that this Reformed Zoomer doesn't acknowledge that.
else, you wouldn't be an atheist. Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context. How do you know which religion is true? Well, everyone, religious or not, has faith in a certain worldview. It's just that some worldviews are called religions and some are secular.
No? Like, existentialism and nihilism and Epicureanism, humanism, these are all philosophies. Like, you can be a Christian humanist. They aren't mutually exclusive. As opposed to, like, you can't be like maybe Christian Buddhism. Maybe some people combine the two. Like, I know Messianic Judaism combines Christianity and Judaism, so I guess to a certain degree, like, you could mix and match to get your desired religious experience. But, like, there is a definite difference between having a system of philosophy by which you make sense of the world or decide what is good versus a religious belief. Like, a philosophical belief is a different category of thing versus belief in a deity or supernatural elements, right? Like, without supernatural things, you could still believe in humanism, Epicureanism, existentialism, or nihilism, but that's what grounds them in reality.
But everyone has to ask the question of which worldview best explains the world. There's no scientific proof that God exists. Well, by definition, science can only prove things inside the natural world, and by definition, God is something outside the natural world. So science can neither prove nor disprove God. There's no...
Yeah. Because science is the natural world. If God existed in the natural world and was explicable by science, God would not exist, right? Like, so, like, the supernatural can't exist in the natural. Otherwise, we would be able to use science to understand it. Oh, Echoplex Media, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome, raiders. We're going over a short but sweet little video that's going over every counter-argument, apparently, to Christianity from atheists. But also, like, this isn't really a good argument here. Like, science only deals with the physical. Like, yeah. But that means you have no proof that God exists. Like, the proof you have is supernatural proof if you don't have scientific proof. In which case, doesn't really defeat the initial point.
Something outside the natural world. So science can neither prove nor disprove God. There's no evidence of...
This doesn't make sense. If God created the natural world, then that's evidence of God. But that's not evidence of God. We just have evidence of the natural world. Like, That's the thing, right? Like God didn't leave fingerprints behind. And if you were to attribute some unknown in the natural world to God, then that would just be a God of the gaps fallacy. You know, like it's just attributing gaps in your own knowledge to the doing of a deity. Oh yeah, it's going to be very Christian centric because he's literally a Christian zealot. Like this is his website. Like yeah, I think this guy might be a little bit a little bit biased towards which religion.
Of anything supernatural. Well, that's just not accurate. There are medically documented cases of people with demonic possession speaking in languages they don't know, for example, and people with near death experiences getting information they never had access to.
Okay, a couple of things. Um, Citations needed. Actually, citations needed. Like, you need to have data that like people can go over and proofread essentially. Like, if you have the data, then publish it in an academic journal. But the issue is you can't have supernatural evidence, because once it becomes evidence, it becomes natural evidence. Like once it becomes like scientific evidence in the natural world, it no longer is supernatural. Like it's the same point we just went over. Yeah, he just argued that God exists outside the natural world, but then is saying there's evidence of God in the form of supernatural events. Yeah. Right? Like this is contradictory. What actual evidence is there of this? Well, he's posting a photo of Demonic Foes by Richard Gallagher. The world's leading psychiatric authority on demonic possessions. Uh-huh. Just an article in Esquire here. Decades ago, Dr. Richard Gallagher, an academic psychiatrist, awoke in the night to the sound of his two otherwise docile cats screeching and clawing at one another. Gallagher was forced to separate the berserk cats into 2 rooms and then went back to bed, mystified by their strange behavior. The next morning, a priest with whom Gallagher was acquainted knocked at the door, accompanied by a woman with jet black hair, whose eyeliner stretched to her hairline. "How'd you like those cats last night?" she quipped. This was Julia, who claimed to be a high priestess of Satanism, possessed by demonic forces. Her remarkable case was among the first of many that Gallagher would encounter in a long career spent distinguishing psychosis from alleged possession. Julia exhibited a series of strange behaviors that, as Gallagher sees it, constituted a once-in-a-century possession, from speaking in languages she claimed not to know to allegedly levitating for over half an hour during an exorcism. Uh-huh. It's real cool that like despite consistently encountering demons throughout his life, he doesn't have any evidence at all to show for it. Also, there's a non-0% chance that like a high priestess of Satanism would be like pulling his leg. Like would be doing this to like prank him. Right, because like Satanists don't actually believe in Satan. Like Satanists believe in like generally no god, and just use Satan as like a vehicle or symbol to like represent their rebellion against organized religion, and in particular Christianity. But it is fun that he mentioned that she wore a lot of eyeliner, clearly possessed by the devil. I know I'm possessed. I space out and then don't recall what happens. They tell me a voice comes out of me. I don't know. I don't remember anything. It's a demon, I'm sure. Since the early 1990s, he's an active member of the International Association of Exorcists. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. A real demon. What a weirdo.
The Bible has contradictions. Okay, you think you found an apparent contradiction that the church hasn't known about for 2,000 years? Every apparent contradiction can be explained by understanding just a little bit of theology.
Yeah, except that like the people who amended those contradictions like dedicated their entire lives to contorting mental arguments to try and justify how the contradiction wasn't really a contradiction. Yeah, it's hardcore cope.
The Gospels were anonymous. Okay, anonymous doesn't mean we have no idea who wrote them. It just means the names of the authors aren't signed in the text itself. But we literally have writings from church fathers who knew the apostles and can verify that they indeed wrote the books named after them. The Gospels miss.
Yeah, but that doesn't address the majority of the rest of the Bible.
Quote Jesus. Now, it's true that a lot of secular scholars think the Gospels are a mix of real quotes from the historical Jesus and fake quotes added by the church, but none of them can agree on which quotes are legit and which are not, so we can discard their opinions. Jesus never.
What? Well, nobody can agree on which of these are true, so we'll just believe all of them. What?
Can agree on which quotes are legit and which are not, so we can discard their opinions. Jesus never claimed to be God. Yes, he did. He didn't say, I am God, worship me, but he showed that he was God in many places in all four Gospels by doing things that only God can do. It's true that he didn't walk around before his resurrection claiming to be God, because he wanted people to figure it out themselves. That's why he kept saying, Who do you say that I am? However, after his resurrection, people figured out that he was God, and Jesus congratulated them. The later one of the Gospels.
I think honestly, I could buy his argument on this one. Like I read the New Testament, and it's pretty apparent to me that like Jesus is claiming like some level of divinity in a way that like would be interpreted as completely unacceptable for the time. You know? How old is this video? 2 weeks old.
The later one of the Gospels was written, the more divine it makes Jesus seem, so we can extrapolate that Jesus was originally a human figure who got made more divine over time.
What?
Alright, maybe some Gospels emphasize Jesus' divinity more than others, but what about Paul's letters that fully confess the divinity of Jesus and were also written before any of the Gospels? So that breaks your pattern. The Bible supports slavery.
I have to say I have never heard this argument from an atheist. This seems particularly weak. Like if you're gonna attack the validity of holy texts, a holy text, like this is a weak argument to go with.
And were also written before any of the Gospels, so that breaks your pattern. The Bible supports slavery. No, it doesn't. Just because there's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible supports it. There are some Old Testament verses that could be interpreted as condoning slavery, but Jesus himself said that the Old Testament made accommodations to people's sinful state. And also, slave owners in the American South had slave Bibles for their slaves to read, but it omitted a lot of the real Bible, so if the Bible actually did support slavery, this wouldn't have been necessary.
Well, one, like, the Bible doesn't just have slavery in it, it gives specific rules for, like, how you treat slaves. Like, let's see here. Like, here we go. And if a man sells his daughter to be a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who has betrothed her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt deceitfully with her. And if he has betrothed her to his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes another wife, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marriage rights. And if he does not do these three for her, then she shall go free without paying money. Like, this is selling your daughter to be a sex slave. This is how you would go about doing that. Like, this was and the multiple times throughout the Bible that slavery was described and talking about how you should treat slaves makes it pretty clear that, like, the Bible tends to be pretty justifying towards slavery, you know. But the counter argument here is basically that, well, Jesus said that things are different now, basically. Like, Jesus came, so Old Testament laws don't apply anymore. And actually, slaves weren't allowed to read the full Bible, and therefore, that's proof that it was anti-slavery. But, like, slavers used the Bible to justify their enslavement of slaves. They were Christian slave owners using the good book to justify it. Like, they believed vehemently that they were correct for owning slaves, that they were in line with the Bible for owning slaves. Good night, Ghostly Sriracha. It's not true. Jesus says he was not there to change one part of the law. Well, he also went on to say something along the lines of he's here to fulfill the law. Like, basically, the Christian answer to this would be that, like, Jesus, like, didn't come to change the law, he came to fulfill the law, and what he means by that is, like, dying and taking on the sins of humanity in the process. So, like, when he says he's not there to change the law but to fulfill it, that's what he's talking about, thereby releasing people from the duties imposed upon them by the Old Testament, essentially. Hey, Towson Alexo, how you doing? Well, just on the logic being that it's still sinful to do the things described in the Old Testament. However, those sins can now be forgiven without the use of the law, like without you having to go and like sacrifice to cleanse your sins. Like you can now accept Jesus's love and forgiveness, and then you can go on and not be burdened by that sin anymore. That is if you asked a Christian to explain it to you, that's what they would say. So like pointing out that, oh, well, it says this in the Old Testament isn't really a gotcha against a lot of Christians because they don't necessarily conceive of it in the same way, you know? Important question. What brand of Christian and is the guy in the video? Because depending, other Christians could disagree about a lot of stuff. My understanding is that he is a Protestant of some kind. Let's see. Presbyterian Church USA. So he's a Presbyterian. Here we go. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that supports slavery. And that's not that surprising.
A lot of the real Bible, so if the Bible actually did support slavery, this wouldn't have been necessary.
By the way, slave Bibles generally just left out the portion of the Bible that dealt with Moses leading his people to freedom. So it left out that part. It kept a lot of the stuff being pro-slavery.
Christianity supported slavery. Well, sure, some Christians did, but all human civilizations have had slavery. Christian civilization was the first one to abolish it on moral grounds. The fact that you're against slavery is due to Christian influence. Also,
What? So everyone didn't do slavery until Christians changed that. That's actually not true. A lot of abolitionists in the United States happen to be Christian. A lot of abolitionists in Britain happen to be Christian, but there are plenty of groups around the globe that oppose slavery prior to or without Christian influence.
Moral grounds. The fact that you're against slavery is due to Christian influence. Also, most organizations fighting modern-day slavery are Christian. God killed tons of people in the Bible. Well, it's actually way more than that. God numbers everyone's days. He's the giver of life, so he can take it, especially if people sin.
What? God killed tons of people in the Bible, and then, like, the answer is just, yeah. Yep, God kills people. God gave you life, God can take it away. Okay, so, like, I don't know, seems kind of like a capricious God.
Numbers everyone's days. He's the giver of life, so he can take it, especially if people sin. Atheist countries are more prosperous. Yes, it's true that Northern European countries are very prosperous and very secular, but correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not like atheism causes prosperity, it's that prosperity causes atheism because when people have comfortable lives, they don't feel a need to depend on God. But why are these particular countries so prosperous in the first place? They may be secular now, but they're rooted in generations and generations of Protestant Christianity.
It's true. Only Protestant countries are prosperous. Only countries that have been raised on Protestant ways of thinking are prosperous. No one look up how many Christians are Protestant versus how many Christians are Catholic. Don't look it up. Yep, he's trying to push the Protestant work ethic makes you prosperous versus the lazy Catholics.
If you want an example of a country that's atheist and not rooted in Christianity, look at communist China. There's four.
Yeah, look at communist China. Communist China, the one of the largest, the second largest economy in the world.
Of a country that's atheist and not rooted in Christianity, look at communist China. There's 4,000 gods that people believe in, and you're atheist to 3,999 of them. I just go one god further. Okay, this isn't the gotcha that you think it is, because the question of whether some sort of god exists is fundamentally different from the question of which religion is right about God. If God created everything...
I mean, like, this seems to be a pattern here, like, there are 4,000 gods and you're atheist to 3,999 of them. This is cringe atheist, like, Reddit bullshit, right? The response here is just kind of not addressing the point, not addressing the question at all. Like, obviously you're a religious person, so you believe God exists, yeah? But, like, what God is to, like, I don't know, a Zoroastrian is going to be very different than what God is to a Presbyterian. Like, the existence of each is going to have far-ranging, what's the word I'm looking for? Consequences? No. You guys get what I mean.
Is fundamentally different from the question of which religion is right about God. If God created everything, then who created God? Well, God is defined as the uncaused causer. Everyone knows there needs to be a first cause at the beginning of the chain of all events in the universe, and it makes a lot more sense for that first cause to be a personal God who caused things for a reason, rather than some random impersonal force.
So, like, a couple of things here is just, this is true. Like, the uncaused causer thing is like rather logically sound. Can someone share notes? The main issue here is that, like, this is again God of the Gap stuff, right? Where, like, attributing a god to just an unknown cause rather than like just saying we don't know, right? Valhalla Vidya, yeah, I'd be happy to talk more about gender abolitionism.
God who caused things for a reason, rather than some random impersonal force. Science disproves God. Well, actually, the church invented modern science. All the founders of the scientific revolution deeply believed in God.
Okay, one, science doesn't disprove God. Like, by the very nature of God and the very nature of science, that this is just incorrect. But second of all, it is interesting that his rejoinder here, his response is the church invented modern science. Except that's not true. He's just attributing to the church the actions of scientists who were nominally religious.
Church invented modern science. All the founders of the scientific revolution deeply believed in God, and medieval theologians laid the groundwork for modern science by seeing...
Yeah, I wonder how Galileo thought about his home church as he lay dying. I wonder. Yeah. Also, I'm not sure if we want to take Sir Isaac Newton's ideas on the supernatural too seriously when he's saying, you know, atheism is so senseless, when he literally killed himself drinking mercury while trying to make the Philosopher's Stone because he was a fucking alchemist.
God, and medieval theologians laid the groundwork for modern science by saying the world was governed by an intelligent creator. That means we can understand the world with our intelligence.
Yeah, but, like, you could arrive at that same point without arguing God is intelligent and I am intelligent, therefore I could understand the works of God. Like, you can arrive at that by just saying, hey, what, like, Like, you could just arrive at that same point of like, oh, hey, when I drop this rock, it falls on the ground. I wonder how I can explain that, and then coming up with different theories and testing. Like, you could come up with that with like the concept of cause and effect, and you being able to understand that, and then apply it to the rest of, like, you can come up with this idea very easily without attributing it to God.
And studying God led to studying the world because the world is God's creation. God is just used to fill in the gaps of things that science can't explain yet. Well, actually, God is the reason for everything, even things that science can explain. It's not.
But like, that's what the initial poster is talking about, is the God of the gaps fallacy. Attributing, well, God did it, instead of like doing research and finding it out. Like, it's okay to just not know things sometimes. Like, atheists and scientists are perfectly fine saying, we don't know how that happened, but we're trying to figure out we're trying to figure out what happened. You know, like, that's a normal thing. But like, he can't really address the God of the gaps thing, since he's already used God of the gaps in a couple of these responses. So his response is instead to kind of sidestep the question and instead be, or statement, I guess, say, well, God's behind everything, so whether science can explain it or not. Which isn't really responding to the point of this one.
Not one or the other. It's not like everything's explained by either science or God, and the more science can explain, the less God can explain. Really, science can explain almost everything, but God is still behind it all, because.
Yeah, but the issue is here that, like, when you make that appeal that God can explain everything and then science can only explain limited things, the idea here is that many people just fill God into the gaps and say science will never be able to explain that, and that has not been true, actually.
The science explains the how, and God explains the why.
But also, like, that's not an argument to, like, it's not like an argument to the existence of God, I guess. But it doesn't need to be, so maybe I'm being a bit too nitpicky here.
If God is good, why can't he destroy all evil? Well, he eventually will. Why can't he do it now? Because he'd have to destroy you. Why does God let any bad things happen? Because we deserve it. Well, animals don't sin, so why do they suffer? Well, the Bible says all things will be restored, so if God is good, we can assume that they will be compensated. How do you know that God isn't evil instead?
Sorry, just real quick, I had to take all this in. This seemed like a series of points here about, like, the problem of evil. And it did not answer the problem, actually. Like, all of this is, God created you fucked up, and because you're fucked up, he would have to destroy you if you fix things now. And, you know, but even if he did destroy you, all things will be restored and compensated, so, this explanation is just, oh, God is evil, right? Like, that is the conclusion one would come to from these responses, right? Like, with these responses, this makes God seem like he's just holding a giant magnifying glass over ants and frying them. And when, like, someone asks him about it, God's just like, "Oh no, it's okay. I'll bring them back."
Good, we can assume that they will be compensated.
Like, I come from a background of, like, having participated in church apologetics, but, like, these aren't even good apologetics, you know?
How do you know that God isn't evil instead? Well, because evil is not a thing the way good is. Just like cold is just a lack of heat, and dark is just a lack of light, Evil is just a lack of good, and for good to be objective, it needs to come from God. So a God who is objectively evil is logically impossible. Can God make a rock he can't?
So how do I put this, right? Like, if God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, right? Um then in a sense he would have to create evil, right? With this, at least with this kind of a response, right? Um like you can only have like, the example he gives here is cold is lack of heat, right? He would need to, in this case, if you kind of imagine an infinite void that is completely filled with, whatever we can call good, right? This goodness would then have to be drained and unevenly distributed from this infinite void. Um, and like some part of that void would then need to be inhabited by, the absence of good, which would be evil, which would be God creating evil. Like that, the argument here is not as strong, I think, that as he thinks here.
Is just like cold is just a lack of heat, and dark is just a lack of light. Evil is just a lack of good, and for good to be objective, it needs to come from God. So a God who is objectively evil is logically impossible. Can God make a rock he can't lift? Well, you're just asking if God can contradict himself, like can God lie, or can God change, or can God make another God? And the answer to all those things is no. God being all-powerful means he can do anything to things outside himself. It doesn't mean that he can do anything to himself or that he can contradict himself.
This is true. That was a good response. That was a solid response. That is true in like the logical framework of Christianity.
Why did God let evil exist at all? So he could be glorified in defeating it. Triumph over evil is a greater good than evil having just never existed.
Why did God let evil exist at all? Because he's glorified in defeating it. Um, this just makes God seem like an asshole. Oh, well, you're suffering because he's, he likes feeling good about your suffering. What? He likes feeling good about you overcoming this. What? Like, again, this is why, like, oftentimes apologetics to people outside of like the Christian bubble just make God look bad. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, it's like he's fucking Jigsaw from the Saw movies.
Religion is just wishful thinking. Well, if that were true, then the Bible wouldn't be all about how much we all suck.
Okay, wait.
Wishful thinking. Well, if that were true, then the Bible wouldn't be all about how much we all suck.
This isn't a good response, because there are plenty of people who revel in like misery and self-flagellation, right? Yes, Towson, I believe he does oppose gay marriage, yeah. Like, the Bible, well, no, the Bible is about how much we suck. The issue isn't that it's not about how much we suck. The issue is that there are plenty of people who like revel in being told that they suck, right? There's like a whole contingent of people who are like, you're right, I do suck. I do deserve to go out and like beat myself bloody with this cat of nine tails. You know? Like, there were people who spent their entire lives going out and living in the desert, just beating themselves with like brambles. You know? This isn't I don't think this is necessarily a defeater to this point. Alex or Alexo is fine. Oh, thanks, Alex.
Psychology explains why you believe in God. So what? If God is real, we should expect there to be some psychological or social benefit to believing in him.
Okay, but you already established that God exists outside of the natural, so, like, you're kind of going back on that point, right? Like, if God exists outside of the natural, then, like, you would be able to point to these benefits as, perhaps evidence of his existence, which you didn't earlier, which is interesting. But also, yeah, psychology doesn't necessarily explain why you believe in God, though it does explain some people's belief in God. For example, like God delusions. Those are real phenomena that don't necessarily indicate the existence of God,
Spiritual experiences can be explained by brain chemicals. Well, romantic experiences can also be explained by brain chemicals, but that doesn't mean your wife isn't real.
This isn't the same thing, right? Like if this was just reframed slightly, supernatural experiences can be explained by brain chemicals, which is true. Like anyone who's been on like a mushroom trip knows that this is true. Okay, but this one doesn't even follow because no one's trying to argue that your wife isn't real.
So spiritual experiences being explained by brain chemicals doesn't mean that God isn't real. Well, drug trips show that spiritual...
No, like the wife in this situation is not like some entity that no one can prove exists, I gave your wife a spiritual experience last night. Ayo.
Experiences are from the brain. Well, people who have had both drug trips and near-death experiences say that they're completely different categories of feeling.
Okay, but like, this is, again, a lot of these aren't even really like answering the atheist arguments, right? Like, drug trips show that the spiritual experiences are from the brain, just like I brought up last time, right? People who have near-death experience and drug trips say they're different. Well, yeah, because they're different drugs and chemicals in your brain. Different chemicals would lead to different experiences, which again, people who have had drug trips from different drugs would be able to tell you. Well, yes, probably for him, his wife is an abstract concept.
The story of Jesus was copied from the story of Horus or some other ancient character.
The story of Jesus was copied from Warhammer 40k? The Horus heresy. It all makes sense now.
Okay, dude, that's a Reddit atheist-level myth. Even atheist scholars know that that's silly. Faith is the opposite of logic and reason.
I don't know enough about, like, this one, about, like, the story of Horus or, like, potential links there to, like, really make an argument here, so.
Faith is the opposite of logic and reason. No, it's not. Faith just means trust. Anytime you eat food, you're having faith that it's not poisoned, even if you can't scientifically prove it. If you're married, you have faith that your wife loves you, even if you can't scientifically prove that. And if you tried to scientifically prove it, she'd probably get very mad at you because it would mean you didn't trust her.
Okay, but, like, the two things you just described also rely on logic and reason. Like, you don't just eat you don't just drink a vial of arsenic because you have faith that it won't hurt you. The reason you eat pizza or fries or ice cream or donuts or drink a soda or whatever is because you have data to pull from that you can use your reason and logic to understand, which indicate to you that by eating those things, you will be fine. Your faith is predicated on the logic and reason in this situation. Your faith in your partner is predicated on the logic and reason of all of your experiences with your partner that lead you to having faith in her. But when it comes to God, it is a different kind of faith. It is a different kind of trust because you don't have logic and reason necessarily guiding you towards that point. You don't have like evidence from the natural world to bring you to that point. I have a cool ass coworker getting me into Warhammer. Getting into Warhammer is really fun. I haven't played the game, probably not going to play the game anytime soon, but I really like the unfolding story of it all.
Evolution proves God didn't create the world. Well, not necessarily. God often works through natural processes in the Bible, and for all of church history, there have been prominent Christian theologians who have had a more metaphorical interpretation of Genesis, even well over 1,000 years before Darwin existed.
Okay, so true. However, this is probably another solid like apologetic response. Like if you are someone who would believe in God working through natural processes or putting in place natural processes in order to create what we see in the natural world would make sense. But like that's not you can't say God works through natural processes when you don't know you have faith in God. You have faith that God works through natural processes. It's not like God set you down and showed you how he does this, you know?
Interpretation of Genesis, even well over 1,000 years before Darwin existed. Christianity only spread because of military conquest. Well, eventually they did do military conquest, but for the first 300 years of Christianity, it was illegal, and it took over the Roman Empire despite that because of how popular it became. Constantine and...
Yeah, but also that was 1,700 years ago. Like, again, this is kind of what's irritating me about this. These aren't answers to atheist arguments. This is just like, well, it wasn't that bad because, you know, for 300 years it was illegal and you know, but like, what about the 1,700 other years? You know, this isn't an argument. It's ignoring the argument.
Took over the Roman Empire despite that because of how popular it became. Constantine invented what we now know of as Christianity. Again, Reddit atheist level myth. Atheists can do better than that. Listen to an actual scholar. If Christianity...
Wait, but Constantine had a definitive hand in shaping modern Christianity due to his involvement in the religious councils of the time. Like, yeah, like, if you've ever heard of, like, the Nicene Creed, chat, like, that's due to Constantine, the first council of Nicaea. An ecumenical council to kind of, like, figure out what Christianity was and was not. It was organized by the Roman Emperor Constantine. So, I mean, like, it's not a Reddit myth. Like, literally what codified early Christianity was Constantine's intervention, you know? Now, did Constantine invent modern Christianity? No. But also, like, the early church councils were absolute shit shows. Just absolute shit shows. Like, people were excommunicating each other like crazy. People were like, Jesus is a ghost. Actually, Jesus is just a man. Actually, Jesus is God. And then, like, people just kept getting, like, absolutely wonky throughout a lot of these ecumenical councils, okay? Yes, One Hand Wonder, I would recommend the extra credits, extra history video about the Council of Nicaea. It's actually super, super interesting. And but being that we're in the copyright fortress, I'm not going to risk it right now.
Level myth. Atheists can do better than that. Listen to an actual scholar. If Christianity is true, why are there so many denominations of it? Well, yeah, there are a lot.
Fun fact, by the way, did you guys know Nestorianism is still around? I didn't know that. Like the Nestorians were people who believed like Jesus was just like a dude, you know? But like he was both the incarnation of God but also fully realized as a full human being.
A lot of denominations, but the things they agree on are a lot more significant than the things they disagree on.
This is absolutely not true.
A lot of denominations, but the things they agree on are a lot more significant.
There are like 50,000 denominations of Christianity. Like there are so many different like schisms and groups. It's wild. But like when you talk about doing communion is absolutely not something that all Christians agree on. Or like Jesus or the necessity of baptism, another thing that is disagreed on. The concept of the Trinity. A lot of people have different concepts about the Holy Trinity. Like this is all stuff that like he's like they agree on the essentials. No, they don't. No, they don't. They don't agree on all these.
Than the things they disagree.
So some of them believe that when you do communion, you feel like it physically transforms into human flesh in inside your body.
There's no evidence for Jesus outside the Bible. Well, that's not true. There's the ancient Jewish historian Josephus.
Yeah, this is not true. There is some there. I believe there are some Roman records of his existence, etc. But like, no like third party like I was there and he did a miracle. Like there's no independent like account like that.
Josephus, who wrote about Jesus, and he's one of the reasons why even secular scholars know Jesus historically existed. You really think God made billions of galaxies with billions of stars in each of them just to have a personal relationship with you? Yes.
I mean, that would be an expected response. All right. You know? That like I find it interesting to revisit stuff like this because like I grew up in a conservative evangelical Christian household with like a lot of these ideas and questions in my head and having them answered by like apologetic thought. You know, the apologetics is kind of like the field of defending Christianity. You know? All the atheists were owned and there was much crying. Yeah, like I guess my main thing is here, like it's interesting for me to revisit this, but like I also don't view it as terribly important that I like push against Christianity with like my platform and advocacy. I view my platform and advocacy far more better realized and used to like push for people to get involved in politics and vote, organize on a state, local, and national level to get involved in politics so we can actually like get progressives and socialists elected when we need to, so we can actually leverage our power. But like part of it is interesting for like past reasons, and part of it's interesting just because I've changed so much, you know, from when I used to believe a lot of this stuff. And like that's interesting, and I do think that like far-flung fundamentalism is incredibly dangerous to the body politic, to like, our interpersonal relationships, to our health. But like, I also don't necessarily view it as like the worst thing to be like, a bit Christian, a bit Buddhist, a bit Hindu, a bit whatever, I think that you can have good politics and still be a religious person. I don't feel the need to try and take religion away from anybody. But like at the same time, I like having answers to certain questions, or to know how people are going to respond when like their ideology gets pushed back on, right? And the other thing is, I would describe myself not as an atheist, but as like I'm a fence sitter. Like I don't know. Like I don't feel like I can say for sure that God doesn't exist, or like some sort of supernatural doesn't exist. But I'm not like banking on that for anything, Yeah, I'm agnostic. A devout agnostic? No, just agnostic, I never had like the moment of like being broken from Christianity, just kind of like having this fading, and as I reckoned and dealt with the existing bigotry within the Christian church, that in turn just made me realize the inconsistencies displayed by the people who profess to be the biggest lovers of God, And yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at. That is atheist, just agnostic atheist. Well, then I'm comfortable being an agnostic atheist, I suppose. Um, the main thing that gets me is people who will use these apologetics arguments to justify their bigotry in today's day and age, or to pretend that like people in the past didn't use their religious beliefs to justify the worst types of behavior and treatments towards people who disagreed with them, So I guess that's just kind of where I'm at with that one. I thought it would be a fun little video to go over, and I feel like I've come out with a lot more thoughtfulness than I thought I would. Boop, boop, boop. How we all doing? We've been going for about 7 hours now. It's far too late here. That makes sense, Foxbat. Thanks for joining us. Still call myself an anti-theist, despite the fact that I've made room for people who have beliefs but are harmless. I have no need to update the labels I imposed on myself pre-Gamergate just because other anti-theists have shown to be cringe. That's fair.